Hello and welcome to the RT Development Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Rossignol, and today we're in for our next episode. Our next episode is with the scout for the Oakland, or shoot, can't say Oakland anymore.
Just
The
athletics.
Athletics. So for the Athletics, he is the NorCal scout for the Athletics, Troy Stewart. Welcome to the show, Troy.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Appreciate
Of course, I'm excited to have you on, go over a little bit about just scouting in general, how you got here, and more importantly, I think especially for people who are watching, is how athletes can help themselves, and for parents, a little just info of what scouts look for, kind of the process of it, and how players can help themselves out.
Sounds good.
But just start kind of walk us through a little bit of like your playing career and kind of how you got to being a scout with the Athletics. I want to say it's like year 5 or 6.
Yeah, going on year 6 this year.
Oh, very nice. So,
I kind of did it. I would say I started a little differently than a lot of scouts do. In terms of I didn't play pro ball, or a lot of guys coached for a lot of years, either professionally, collegiately, got in the game that way. I kind of started. I played through high school basically and blew out my arm a couple times. It was nothing special either way. But I ended up going to Long Beach State and reached out to the baseball team there, and they kind of brought me on as an undergrad assistant, student manager, whatever you want to call it, and kind of did everything from the laundry, all the stuff nobody wants to do, to advanced scouting and running the video and hitting fungos on the field, throwing batting practice. So kind of did a little bit of everything, got to be in the dugout and learn how the college baseball game works, which was very instrumental, I think, in my professional career so far. And then that turned into a internship in the Cape Cod going into my senior year, where I kind of learned the basics of scouting and got to see a lot of really good players going into their draft year. And then graduated college, got my first job with the Tigers, went and worked in Lakeland, Florida, did a player development internship out there, and did that for a year, learned a lot about analytics and a lot of video and what they were doing out there with all the new age stuff we use now. And wanted to get into scouting. That was something that really interested me, front office scouting, and I got on with the A's that COVID year as their scouting intern in office, and COVID kind of screwed that up a little bit, where I kind of did a half season through the draft, and they were able to bring me back the next year, which actually kind of worked out because I did all my intern duties, but also we didn't have a Northern California area scout at that time, so I kind of just got thrown into it. I don't know if that's what they expected, but I kind of just became the area scout, and that next year they hired me full time as the scout. So I guess that's awesome. That's the story of everything. Yeah, how it worked out.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember. I think it was either I guess it was like your first full years out. I met you out watching Ian Canning.
Yeah.
And obviously in trains with us, and you're out there. We just started talking, and I kind of stayed in touch ever since, and so it's been good to have you as a resource to be able to ask you questions. Obviously we see the guys that are in here to here, but you're out all across Northern California, so give us a comparisons of where guys are at versus where the other guys are at and things like that. So it's definitely been an awesome resource, and I became a friend through it all, so it's been good to get to know you and have you part of our group.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's been awesome. And same thing with you, having you as a resource for all these players down here really helps. And you get a way better dynamic of the player and the kid when you're here and knowing you and hearing what you have to say about them. And that all goes a long way into scouting and the whole outlook on it too.
Absolutely. Going back to Long Beach a little bit, how did that piece of like just going through all the video and all the evaluation stuff help you to how you like look at players now?
Yeah, I think in terms of the video and that sort of thing, it was more just gathering and then me sitting there being quiet, listening to the coaches.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing when you're starting off in any profession is to listen more than you talk, and hear what those guys have to say, because the knowledge and the wealth of knowledge those guys have is unbelievable. So being able to just see how, Troy Buckley was the head coach at that time, who's now the pitching coach at Fresno State, and getting to sit with him when he's talking to pitchers about mechanics and going over video. And we ended up getting TrackMan my senior year, so we were still kind of in the process of gathering and identifying and understanding it a little better at the time. So I wouldn't say we did a ton with it my last year, but it was kind of the gathering stage. So, but just being a part of seeing those guys with all that knowledge and how they talk about the game and the little things they see that then you look at and you're like, oh, maybe I didn't know how to portray that to a player, how to say that to a player, but I see what he's talking about.
Sure.
And I think all those things kind of help in the long run.
Absolutely. Now, as a scout from your time there, do you see the game any differently?
I think the game's definitely changing. I mean, it evolves every year in different ways. The analytics revolution that I think started probably around before I was even in college, in high school, college, with all the talk about Moneyball, but all the stuff before that.
Yeah.
I think the game's definitely changed, and with draft models and the way that we look at players objectively and subjectively, and all the different tools we can use to evaluate a player and to hopefully try to make the best decision with what we have, I think is, if anything, it's helped just with efficiency wise and having a better understanding of players.
Sure, absolutely. So just kind of, what does day-to-day look like for you as a scout?
Yeah, definitely depending on the time of the year. We're just about getting into the spring now, so it's going to be a lot of driving, a lot of games, but that's the fun of it. I think the hunting starts with everybody going and evaluating, and the spring starting for Division I and seeing all those guys. But I mean, the day-to-day is more or less in a routine day. It's getting on the computer in the morning and writing an evaluation, writing a report, or watching video on guys, or kind of just recapping the weekend and looking at what everybody did, and then try to stay healthy and get a little workout in, and then it's time to go scout a game or two, or depending on who's playing and what you can run into that day. I think that's the normal day in the life in the spring for sure.
Yeah. And at the time of this this recording, or when it becomes live, it'll be after the first weekend of D1 baseball, and college baseball has already started with Division II, NAIA JC ball, but this weekend will be the first weekend of D1. So baseball is definitely in full swing, and on average, how many baseball games a week do you typically watch?
I try to go to one every day.
Yeah.
I think you can if you really want to. Obviously, you gotta take a day for yourself every once in a while, but especially early on in the spring, I definitely want to try to get my first looks at as many guys as I can. If it lines up, you got a high school game or a JC game during the day, afternoon, and then if you can line it up with a college Division I game or something like that at night, then that's kind of the ideal day if you can kill two birds with one stone. But
Sure.
Definitely depends on the day.
Absolutely. And what is something, before we get into more like specific questions on like what you look for, things like that, what are some things that you think are maybe misunderstood about scouting?
I think that scouting, maybe not when you look at me because I'm one of the younger guys out here, but a lot of scouts, definitely older scouts or veteran scouts, you get portrayed as you're getting, the analytics are not a part of it, or these guys are pushing really far back on it, and stuff like that. Being around these scouts in Northern California, especially over these past 5-6 years, a lot of these guys are eager to learn, which I think is a big misconception about the whole thing. Like some of some of these guys that have been around the game for 30, 40 years, like they want to know these things and they want to try it because it's all another tool to help you try to make the best decision and be convicted on the player. And you definitely get a little pushback from some guys, but I think for the most part that's the biggest misconception is there's guys that have been doing it way longer than I've been born, that still want to learn and
Sure.
use it as a tool rather than maybe how it's portrayed a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, from talking to some of the other guys, the guys that have been doing it for a while, I think from what I've taken from it, and it's like, I think they use it as a way to like, is it obviously they've been really good at using their eyes and like, like their eyes telling them something, but do the two match up, like what their eyes are telling them and then the data, or is the data matching what their eyes are seeing, or vice versa, and or is there something that they're missing? And I think definitely, with that being said, I think the more guys that I talk to is more they're trying to learn something new and learn more and more about it so they can better their approach.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree.
So, I think this is, and like, there's a ton of stuff, yeah, with all the new stuff that's going on, and yeah, obviously, velo gets you in the door, or guys who have power is going to open up some eyes, things like that. But when you first walk to a field, or you're looking at a guy, what's that first impression like? What are you looking for? What are you trying to notice when your first impression with a player?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for the most part, we all kind of try to get to the games a little early, whether it's to see, batting practice or in and out. But I mean, I like to watch kids when they're not on the field. I mean, there's more to it than just stepping between those white lines. You kind of watch how he interacts with his teammates, his warm ups, how he's stretch routine. You watch all that, especially with pitchers too. Their whole routine out there, and then you get onto the field and you're scouting the tools and the athleticism. And when you walk up, that's the cool part about baseball is everybody looks a little different, but you walk onto a field and a guy sticks out because of the size and the strength and the athleticism. And then obviously during the game, you're scouting tools, you're scouting competitiveness. There's a lot that goes into it. Obviously makeup's a huge thing. But yeah, size, strength, athleticism, tools, consistency, makeup. Those are, I guess, to sum it all up into what you look, the whole process.
And I think just kind of like when over the last few years, we've had some guys that been on the radar, on your guys' radar, and I think for you parents and you athletes, like obviously like Troy himself or some of the other scouts and even college coaches will call and ask about a player, but they can see the overall tools, and they'll ask like my opinion on tools, but one of the things they really always ask is what's their makeup like? How do they go about their business? How do they go about their work? And really seeing if these things that they're seeing on the field and stuff is also matching, the work ethic and things like that, because when they have to put their name on it and their stamp on it for when they go into the draft room and all that, what are they going to get later on after the draft process?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And makeup's that one tool that I don't think is ever going to be able to be quantified, but it means a lot.
Yeah.
And we talk to guys like you and coaches and go sit in the room with them and meet with them and meet with their families and stuff like that, because you try to get the best picture you can of not only the player but the person and what you're getting and what you're signing up for, especially how much money we're paying kids in the draft now. That all goes into it. You want a kid that competes his tail off and is a good teammate and is able to step between those white lines and turn it on a little bit and kind of be an animal and compete and all those things, but also have aptitude and be coachable and all those other things that go into it that a lot of times you can't teach. Either kids have it or they don't. And learning from talking to guys like you and coaches and stuff like that is really the way we can have a better understanding of the person.
100%. And I think this is something I think for young guys to understand. Like, some guys are, generally or can be more gifted than others, and they might have more talent early on than others, and some just might not have to work, depending on their level, might not have to do as much work and still perform really high level. But to that same point, once you get to where a guy like what Troy's job is to find big leaguers, not just to find guys to draft, like their goal. And when you're getting to that big league level, all those guys are pretty much, for the most part, there's outliers, but for the most part, are that same level. So now, if you're a guy who isn't doing the work or doesn't have the right mindset, it will eventually catch up to you at some point. And so they're trying to find that stuff early on before it's too late.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the higher you go up, the shorter the pyramid gets, and it really comes down to a lot of that makeup and that self-belief and that self-confidence that gets you through that. Because especially when you get to pro ball, everybody's got tools, everybody can play.
Yeah.
Everybody's there for a reason, and those guys that end up making it a lot of times, unless they are outliers and are just freakish athletes with freakish tools, a lot of those guys, even with that freakish set of tools, they're still one of the most competitive people you've ever met 100%. And have that belief in them and have a good head on their shoulders and are still coachable and all those sorts of things.
Absolutely. So then the next piece, obviously we talked about first impression. What makes a player what truly makes a player stand out?
There's a lot of things. You can go to a game and see a kid do everything right, and there's also other games where it doesn't go their way. And not that I like to go to games and see kids fail, but I don't want to always go to a game and nothing goes wrong for the kid. Sometimes I want to see, if it's a pitcher, I want to see an error made in the field that should have been an out, and then something else happens and all of a sudden he's got himself into a little situation where he's got to work his way out of an inning, or there's a blue pit that scores 2 runs with 2 outs, and you want to see how he acts. You want to see how he walks off the mound. You want to see if it affects him and how it affects him positively or negatively. I think all that stuff goes into it, that aside from going to a field and watching the kid perform and looking at a stat line, there's so much more that I think goes into it that separates kids in a good or bad way.
Sure. And what are mistakes players make trying to stand out?
Not being who they are. I think, especially in the scouting community, in the scouting world, a lot of times if we're going to see players, unless it's a complete unknown pop-up guy that we're trying to figure out, a lot of these kids we've been seeing for years. We've been watching them play, and now it's just their draft year. Whether it's I tell high school kids all the time, there's things like area codes where there's 250, 300 scouts and college coaches out there, and then they get to their spring, their draft season, and all of a sudden they're trying to do too much at the plate or on the mound, and they're not being who they are, when in reality, like, they've already pitched in front of more scouts than they're ever going to pitch against or hit, be in the box with people in the stands than they ever have in their life. So, but that's a big thing you see a lot is either draftitis for college juniors that put a little too much pressure on themselves and are trying not to be themselves, or it's, it is hard subconsciously. I don't know if I could have ever done it as a 16, 17, 18-year-old high school kid, but to be on the mound and see 50 radar guns pop up every pitch, that's something you have to get over, and I'm sure it's really hard to do, and I can't speak from experience, but I think just being yourself, because we've watched you for there's a reason why we're in the stands. We like something about you,
Absolutely. And I think, and you touched on it a little bit earlier, and I think this is, I think a big thing, but for you, just effort and energy. Where do you put that in terms of things that you measure?
It's up there just with everything, and the love of the game. you want to sign a kid and you want to draft a kid and be that little part of that kid's dream that, loves baseball and wants to be a professional athlete and wants to be a big leaguer. The effort and the intensity and all those things that go into it, those are huge things that you want to see out of guys every day. No matter if it's going good or it's going bad, you want to see that out of guys, because if not, like, why am I wasting my time watching you and it doesn't even look like you care on the field?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, and this is not as much about effort, but I think just in terms of like body language, and I know just talking to you or any of the other guys, like you guys know guys aren't going to go 4 for 4 every game, and you might go 0 for 4, especially like the college guys when they're facing some pretty good competition. I mean, let's say like for us or here locally, your Stanford's going to be facing some pretty high level ACC teams. There's going to be some pitchers that are going to be pretty good. You might not have a good day, but what is your body language? What are you showing? Ground ball hits a shortstop, or are you running out? Like those little things matter a lot. And so, yes, they all want to. You want to go to the field and watch a guy go 4-4, but those other things still play a pretty big piece of what they're looking at in terms of especially like makeup and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in general, baseball's a failure sport. We're gonna go in there, and I mean, at this level, a lot of guys succeed a little more than they fail at times, just because of the level of competition. But we expect them to not be. I mean, they're not going to be perfect.
Sure.
But running out hard 90s and doing the little things, making the extra, being there for a cutoff, being in the right place on the field, backing guys up, knowing where you're supposed to be, like all those things go into just being a baseball player, which is another aspect of what we're looking for. At the end of the day, you're looking for really good baseball players that have tools and can help eventually the A's hopefully get to another World Series.
Yeah, absolutely. So, separating good from special. What separates a good high school player from a real prospect?
High school kids, I think maturity and makeup's a big thing off the field. There's a lot of guys with tools, and there's a lot of guys that throw hard, and there's a lot of guys with stuff. But I think there are a small few that are more ready for professional baseball than not, and maybe need to go develop in college, whether that's between the ears or on the field or both. Because a lot of kids these days aren't ready for pro ball, and that's okay. Most kids do go to college. But I would say in my time doing this, the ones that I've seen have success out of high school are the ones that when you were around them, it was just a little different. I can't really explain it, but those kids were just always present and, had their routines and they were committed to every little thing they did. And it kind of, you saw it every day, whether it was performance or just, even if the results weren't there, you could always see the process was there.
Absolutely. And we don't have to get into too much details, but you did have a first-round high school draft pick. So, what was that, your second year?
My second year, second round. Henry Bolte out of Palo Alto. Yeah. He's handling himself in AAA last year, so we'll see. I'm excited for him.
That's awesome. What separates a college player from someone draftable?
Meaning, like, what separates yourself in college?
Yeah.
I think college, you kind of you have a lot more data, which helps, and you have a better understanding of who they are over watching them over the course of 3, 4, 5 years, 6 or 7 now sometimes, but the way everything's going. But I think you have a way better understanding of what a guy can and can't do on the field in 3 years, and that's not always true because guys all develop at different times. So you have to kind of still take every player individually and know their story. And, you watch them. Sometimes you get to watch them in high school all the way through their junior, senior years of college if they stay local. Sometimes you get them for 3 years when they get to Stanford, Cal, Sac State, all those places, Santa Clara. So you kind of just take every little part of it and you get a better idea the longer you're around them.
Sure. I mean, obviously, like some guys just stand out. You can tell they're different. They're just the way ball comes out of their hand, the way they move in the field, things like that. What are like things that I kind of touched on a little bit. What are some things that like when you're going and watching it just makes you guys stand out?
I think that the easiest way kids stand out is athleticism and size and strength before the game starts. I mean, there are a lot of 5 o'clock hitters and a lot of guys that can throw really hard and throw a lot of strikes in bullpens, and then they go out and in between their ears. It's a little different, and it affects them on the mound in game. But I would say to really stand out, I mean, it's in anything. If you're looking around, that you usually the first thing that catches your eye is the biggest, strongest person or the tallest person, like all those things that maybe aren't God given, but in terms of strength and athleticism.
For sure.
Yeah, those are probably the two big ones.
Absolutely. I know for us, we talk about our guys all the time, and it's, like whether guys like it or not, the first thing you guys see or even the college level, like when they go to a field, they see your presence, how big you are, how you fill out a uniform, and so the eye test is definitely a piece of it. And so I know, and not everyone's the same, but that's why we harp so much on the nutrition side and the strength side, and making sure you're doing those things so that you're setting yourself up for success from the get-go when the guys show up to the field. And let's say Troy or anyone else is going to a game to see someone else, but if you're there and you stand out from the get-go, now their eyes are going to be open and they're like, who's this guy? And then watch from there.
Yeah, we notice all the time. None of us are perfect, and we miss on guys all the time and every year. And sometimes we do run into guys or you see something that you didn't see the last time you were there. But yeah, just being consistent and all those things kind of play a factor into it.
Sure. Now talking high school versus college guys, what you're evaluating from a high school guy versus a college guy. Is there anything that changes how you evaluate a high school versus a college player?
There's definitely the projection factor that, just naturally a 17, 18-year-old kid has a little more or a lot more physical development a lot of times than those 21, 22-year-old juniors and seniors in college. So in terms of on the field, the projectability is something that, sometimes scouts are called dreamers a little bit or those sorts of things, but you do have to kind of take that into account that these kids aren't going to look different or are going to look different at 17 than they are at 25 years old. And so you got to dream a little bit more on high school guys, but you also can't let that be the only reason why you like a guy, because you're dreaming really hard on him.
Sure.
You still got to be a good player and have tools and have all those other things we've talked about.
Absolutely. So how important, or how would you say, whether it's important or how much do you evaluate development trajectory from especially like a high school or college guy?
In terms of the trajectory, it's for high school guys, they're really different in terms of nowadays with velocity. You got guys throwing 100 miles an hour in high school, but for all those guys, you still have to be able to throw strikes and pitch and be a pitcher, because there's a lot of guys. There's more guys than there's ever been that throw really hard, and a lot of them don't find the strike zone, and that's why they're not in the big leagues, because you watch them throw bullpens and everything looks great, and then they get on the mound and things change. But I think in terms of development, high school it's a little bit more of a gamble for sure, because you can see it. You can see what the body you think it's going to look like because you've seen it before, or you evaluate the body and can have an idea of what it's going to be. But it still is up to the player to,
Sure.
Put that weight on and that work ethic and be in the gym and nutrition and all those sorts of things. But everybody's different, and guys all develop at different times. Like there's a lot of guys I've scouted in high school that that made huge jumps, some quicker than others, and some weren't ready in high school, and now they got a chance to go in the first round just because of the way their bodies developed naturally and the effort they've put into it.
I was gonna ask. That was something I was gonna ask you. Is do like if you watch, say, there's a local high school guy that then goes to a local college. Do you take anything into effect when you watch them and kind of their trajectory of how they went, how the jumps they've made from high school to college?
Yeah, that's definitely a thing we pay attention to, because the longer you're around a kid, the better, the more convicted you are on a guy, and you see the development in the body or lack thereof, and then you look at it from the other side of things.
Sure.
What has this kid been doing for 2 or 3 years at whatever school he's at? And so yeah, those are all things we take into account and we're paying attention to, and hopefully we're showing up and you see that development, because everybody develops differently, but also depending on what college or what high school you're at, some high school kids have all this talent in the world and they've never been to a facility or don't know how to work, and you take all that into account when you're projecting on a guy or not projecting on a guy.
Sure. You always, like from the scouts, you always hear about like ceiling projection. How do you determine like how high a guy's ceiling is versus their current skill?
I think you take the tools and the now tools, and then you take, whether it's a pitcher or a hitter, there's a lot of things you take into account with the tools and the body. It's basically, you can project more on a kid that looks like he's going to put on 30, 40 pounds. I mean, 40 pounds of muscle is crazy, but 20 pounds of muscle in the next few years, like it's easier to see because of the body. Or you have a kid that's a long, wiry, athletic, infielder, but he's strength away. Like the one thing I've been told from multiple people in the scouting world is that for hitters, a lot of times power is the last thing to come. So you see a kid at 16, 17 years old that can really hit and, has the body that you can see putting on weight, but has that natural ability to put the barrel on the ball. And, you start to see the progression of the power coming, even if it's a little bit, that you can kind of project a little more on a kid that, hey, maybe there is going to be some power that comes in the coming years, and then you line that up with what you already think of the kid and the other tools, and maybe you have something.
Yeah, and this probably, I would say, it definitely goes to both, but probably a little more towards pitchers. But what signals tell you a player still has upside, or maybe, I don't want to say doesn't have upside, but a little bit more, especially like when talking pitcher, like max effort, and how much more upside do they have?
Yeah, I think the body, the strength, the athleticism, and just where the kid's at. I think physically is the biggest thing. How easy they do things on the field is another big one. The harder these kids are working to try to do everything on the field, a lot of times there's not as much projection as some of those kids that do it naturally and do it easy, and the way they move on the field, and their baseball athleticism kind of shows up more than others. I think that ends up helping out with projection.
Absolutely. So or give everyone a little background, but for this specifically, Troy, so area codes, and Troy runs the NorCal team, or the A's in general is the NorCal team, and Troy is the guy who runs it here. And so obviously, area codes is the top, I don't know, is it how many total high school guys is there?
It's about 27 a team, and I think there's 9. So, what's the math?
It's a lot of
on
math.
that?
It's about 253. If we're
Okay.
if
that's right. If that's right, that's pretty good off the top of the head.
243.
Okay.
So, anyways, either it's top 240 to 250 high school players in the country and broken up among 9 teams. And so Troy runs the NorCal team. With that, yeah, you have the top local guys playing on your team and just all over. What are some of the specific things you look for when you're when you're evaluating at the area code games?
Yeah, you're watching not only the game, but you're definitely dreaming a little bit. Like, these kids are still pretty far away, and especially with underclass, because we do the underclass team and the upper class team, you're really just getting your eyes on these kids for maybe the first time in at a competitive level that maybe they haven't been accustomed to during their lives yet, and getting them around a group of kids that are, on the same path as them, or you think are on that trajectory, and just getting to see them play games against each other and see a lot of times, is this kid as good as we thought when we saw him play in high school or saw him at the tryout. And yeah, I just think it's a really cool event to be able to bring all the talent together for those couple groups of high school classes, and just see them play against each other and stack up against each other. A lot of times, even if kids don't have the area codes they necessarily wanted to have, you still, see that they're on the same path as a lot of those kids. Maybe they're bigger names, maybe they're not. But you also see the way kids have developed, because we get them sometimes as freshmen, sophomores, and then, they show up their senior year and their bodies and everything is completely different. And sometimes they're the same kid that was, sometimes you get the famous kid that was famous at 14 that looks the same when he's 18.
Yeah.
So yeah, you kind of get to see a little bit of everything for that week.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a pretty cool event just overall. I mean, I got to go. I've been a couple times, but went 2 years ago now. We had
half of our team was the Matty R team.
Yeah, we had, I think, 7 guys on the squad, so it's cool to see all of them and to be there and go watch all of them play. But and some of them will still be here local, so you get to watch a few of them continue over the next few years.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see. That particular group was a great group of kids that I know you've worked with for a lot of years. But yeah, it'll be fun to see how those kids develop. Some of them are playing pro ball right now, and some of them are going to be starting their college career. So it's going to be cool to see how they turn out.
Absolutely. So obviously, their showcases are everywhere. You can go to there's showcases every weekend outside of the high school season, it seems like. And so what helps a guy stand out in that showcase environment?
In terms of like area codes, or just like
I would say, outside area codes, area codes, I think probably a little bit easier. You have everyone, but like I don't know, if you go to any of the other local events that there are around here throughout the summers.
A lot of times it's tools, especially at showcases. Tools, strength, athleticism, because a lot of times those showcases you aren't playing in real games. So those are the things that I think get you on the radar, at least to start, and then you kind of go from there and see if they can actually play baseball a lot of times, especially when you're seeing them younger and younger.
Absolutely. And how much does, and this is kind of like when you go to that, are you evaluating purely results or more of like the traits?
More the traits. Showcase especially. I mean, results, you're usually seeing a kid throw to a catcher and there's no hitter in the box, or you're seeing a kid take a couple ground balls and a couple fly balls and then a couple rounds of BP. So, you definitely want to see it on the field, but you're looking at the traits and evaluating, the tools for the most part.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you think people misunderstand about like the showcase evaluation?
I think that a lot of people think that all those rankings mean your kid is gonna be a big leaguer or be a professional baseball player, which there is good in those rankings. They see those kids for years and years, and it's another way for us to evaluate players. at those events, but it's not the end all be all. And there's a lot of kids that don't make a lot of those lists that end up playing in the big leagues, and there's a lot of kids that are on those lists that don't end up playing. And I think just the different types of development as kids is the biggest reason why. I mean, there's a kid that you worked with for your whole life that turned into a pitcher last year and made himself a draft pick that I don't think was on many people's radars for a really long time.
So that specific guy, yeah, he was gonna tie into our next conversation, but and I think I know probably what the answer is, but just for what was the one thing that made Caleb stand out?
Well, the first time I saw him, he had a hose, but he was also playing shortstop.
Yeah.
I saw him at one of those, showcase area code ID things, and he's chucking the ball from shortstop, and I saw Scotts Valley, so I immediately thought of you and went and asked him or called him off to the side and say, hey, do you work with Matt? And, yeah, my whole life. I was like, oh, are you just a shortstop or do you pitch? And he's like, everybody's been wanting me to pitch for a long time. I'm just starting, or I think I might start. And I think I called you or something the next day and asked you, and you're like, we've been trying to get him on the mound for years. We've always seen the arm, and it worked out for him. And that's a testament to Caleb and the work he put in and the person he is. I think it's a kid you want to root for because you not only saw the development on the field, but you saw the work ethic and the consistency and the routine that he did that kind of separated himself, I think, mentally, which as a high school kid is one of the bigger components that goes into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think obviously there was a lot of things that helped him put himself on the map. And I think just the one thing that separated him from the average, the typical high schooler is just his attention to detail and everything he did and how he went about his business, which helped put him in the position that he was in. And so I think a lot of guys train, a lot of guys work hard, but like that attention to detail to how you go about your business is definitely something that separates him and separates others in general, as to help you take that next step and put you in that maturity to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I think another thing that we talked about earlier that kind of happened with him and the trajectory of him was, at area codes when we got him and we put him on the mound and you worked with him a little bit. And I know he had a couple innings that year before in high school, but he really didn't. He was a thrower on the mound, and he wasn't lighting up radar guns at area codes. And he maybe had 2 pitches, but he was on the mound and like just competing. He just wanted to get guys out. And, a lot of times you walk away from that, but being in the dugout, which is really cool, and getting to know these kids and their stories, I think is a big thing, because going after those outings at area codes, I came away from it like excited to hopefully see him make some jumps if he puts in the work, which he obviously did. But going off a couple innings and, throwing, 88 to 91, definitely wasn't showing that there wasn't oohs and ahs in the crowd as, the Seth Hernandez is throwing 100 that year and stuff. But everybody develops differently. But you saw that competitor in him, which I think was the coolest part.
Yeah, no, I was definitely there's definitely a few traits I would say that he has that stand out, but his competitiveness is definitely something that is very strong and definitely something that helps separate himself for sure. And he does not like to. He's competitive with whatever it is, and so it definitely is a very valuable trait, and which I think will continue to help him for a long time, and one that any of our upper level guys, that something that they just have a different level of competitiveness.
Yeah.
So, and I I would say with him, and I think that you've touched on a lot, but I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think sometimes we get so caught up in um, wanting all these specific tools, but the one specific tool that on my end, that we made sure that he continued to have that helped him, I think, make the jump that he was his athleticism and his ability to just make sure he maintained that athleticism.
Yeah, I think when you turn on the TV and you watch a big league game, no matter what the size or strength or speed or tools of that player is, especially the size with the Jose Altuves and the Aaron Judges, like no matter what they look like, those guys are athletes.
Yeah.
Like on the mound, and whether they're catching, playing first base, or most of them are pretty darn good athletes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think obviously a lot of this stuff is some good information. I think now just some actual specific stuff for parents and even players. But if for high school players, if you were a sophomore or junior listening, what should you focus on right now?
Getting stronger, staying athletic, and playing the game and learning the game and being a baseball player. I think there's some things you get from God-given ability, and there's some things that can separate you and or help those tools come out more. So I think continuing to get in the weight room and be athletic, and especially at an earlier age, like play a lot of sports, go be an athlete. You learn so much about you learn how to control your body, and you learn how to move your feet in different sports, and you learn how to compete different ways and go through adversity, and you learn different things from different sports, and I think all that can help you down in the long run with baseball.
Absolutely. And I think and for parents, more to help their kids, what's one thing they should know or should understand about scouting?
I think that the biggest thing I would tell parents, especially from a young age, is just that kids develop at different times. Don't put everything into some third party that made some rankings of 11, 12-year-old kids. Like, kids look different, and kids do different things, and kids find ways to get better, and kids get worse.
Yeah.
I just think there's no one route to development, and just the way our bodies work and everything, kids are going to develop different ways. So just because maybe if your kid is seen as behind right now or seen as way ahead, it's not the end all be all for parents, especially young kids, even high school kids. Kids develop differently. I mean, there's a lot of development that happens between the age of 16 and the age of 22, 23.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we've had kids that hadn't physically matured, hadn't really hit in like fully those growth spurts, things like that, going into their senior year of high school, and then even beyond, weren't getting recruited and still got drafted. Still are guys that are playing in pro ball. Everyone develops at different times, and obviously, hopefully, guys do prior to like that junior year of high school, so they're getting recruited, maybe get on the radar of scouts. But it's gonna happen at different times for everyone, as long as you just kind of stick with it, stay with it, keep working, and then if you do that, put some good tools together, and then you have a chance and get seen even in college. Doesn't have to be high school.
Yeah, there's a lot of good things that come out of baseball, no matter what level you end up at. I've been fortunate enough to meet and be friends with now, or be colleagues and coworkers with so many great people with so many great backgrounds that have helped me do what I do, that have gotten in the game different ways, or coached or played, and all those sorts of things that you never know what you're going to do, but you're opening doors.
Absolutely.
No matter where you're going.
Absolutely. So as we get here to the end, my one more question for a little rapid fire If you could give one piece of advice to every serious baseball player in NorCal, what would it be?
Get stronger.
It's pretty simple, but yeah, it definitely has uh, a lot of impact and will pay dividends because, I mean, like Troy said, I mean, now, especially college, you're playing against 21, 22, even older guys. So you definitely have to be more physical to compete at that level. And I think one other thing, and we could have talked about it on this whole podcast, and I think it's the obvious, but like, yeah, velocity, everyone's velocity is going up. You know, I mean, the low or the bar of entry is definitely getting higher. Those are all obvious things, but none of that's possible without, making sure you're getting stronger, the athleticism, things like that. Those things that are really going to help you get to that level. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, velocity's the name of the game in some ways now, but you still have to know how to pitch and get people out, and some of that gets pushed under the rug a little bit, but you still see a lot of guys that have always gotten people out and have always known how to pitch that all of a sudden they start throwing a little harder, and now they're, they project, or they end up being more than you projected. But a lot of times it's those guys that have already been able to play baseball very well for a really long time,
sure.
And then something clicked at some point, because you never know.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. We're going to go into our rapid fire questions. These are just like short, quick answers. Kind of have fun with it. But so first one, before you were a scout for the Athletics, who was your favorite baseball team?
I grew up an Angels fan from SoCal.
Yeah. Favorite player to watch? Could be
growing up?
And yeah, anytime.
Mike Trout was probably my favorite player. Ken Griffey.
What's the biggest piece of advice you've got from anyone scouting wise?
There's a lot, but I would say scouting wise, you never have all the answers, and when you think you do, you're probably going to get humbled. So I would say always being eager to learn and listening to people and learning from people, and not always thinking like you have everything figured out.
If there was one thing you wish you could do more of, what would it be?
Golf.
Nice. Well, that's all I got for today. I thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I appreciate it.
No problem.
It
I think it was some good information for your parents and athletes out there, and be able to take this and apply it and start to make changes. With that, I would just say, no matter if you're a underclassman in high school, don't panic if you're not kind of starting to get scouted, right? Everyone's comes at different times. So just keep working, keep doing things that you can control, and put yourself in that position later on. With that, I thank you guys all for listening. If you want to get a hold of us, you can get a hold of us at rossistraining.com and on Instagram at rossistraining. Thanks. Till the next time.